broadcast 1, race officer speaking.
Pressure coming here, pressure coming.
We're 1.5 below.
Stand by, 2 dives here, boys.
We're looking at 10.5 to 42.
Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us for another podcast. It's a bit of a treat this month, a glimpse inside one of the all-time sailing mines. Well, today I'm not on the seafront in Cowes. I have ventured to mainland England, to Poole Harbour, for the big announcement as Team GB reveal who will represent Great Britain next year at the Games in Tokyo. I remember that feeling so well, the relief of selection, then the realisation, the slight panic, that it's not that long to go and there is always so much to do. The weight of expectation that engulfs you as you slip on that shiny new Team GB tracksuit. So I've just been at the big reveal. There's plenty of experience involved. Mills, Scott, Fletcher. It's a fully loaded team. But I'm getting ahead of myself. No doubt I'll have plenty of Olympic chat next year. So thinking ahead to 2020, let me know if there's someone from the Olympic world that you really want to hear from, and I'll see what I can do. Maybe we need an Olympic special as Tokyo draws near. We'll have a think. This month, well, I'm not too sure what to tell you about this month's guest. When it comes to superlatives, I guess there's quite a few I could use. Is he the busiest man in sailing? Is he the most famous man in sailing? Possibly both of those and a whole lot more. He's won the America's Cup for 3 different nations. He's been knighted for services to the sport, but he's also one of sailing's most contentious characters. He's a fierce competitor out on the racecourse and in the boardroom. It is, of course, Sir Russell Coutts. Figuring out what to ask Russell was never going to be straightforward. There's a lot of ground to cover. We touch reluctantly, as you'll hear, on his long and successful America's Cup career. And whilst I was full of questions, eager to know what it was like on the inside, he wasn't so keen. Fundamentally, I think he's over it. It's clear to hear, he's moved on. But we do get a feel for what has made him so formidable. His relentless approach, his technical mind, his decision making. It's a really insightful listen. His passion now, that's clear to hear, is fully about moving the professional end of the sport forward. His big new project is, of course, SailGP, and we've talked a lot about the brand new series in previous pods. It's new and ambitious, big, bold and brave, but also pretty expensive. He's a man working night and day to make it a success. His drive with SailGP seems to really come from a deep-rooted passion, and as you'll hear, it really is at the forefront of his mind. I spoke to Russell just before the event in Cowes. The forecasts were full on. He had a lot going on, but he still managed to sit down and chat. But as you'll hear, he's pretty fired up. I really hope you enjoy the hour I spent with Sir Russell Coutts.
Wouldn't surprise me in a year and a half time if we see high 50s, maybe even 60 being approached. Don't tell me that high performance sailing isn't tactical. The number of people that have come up to me and said, wow, this is generally exciting as a sports prophet.
Russell, first and foremost, welcome. Welcome to the podcast and welcome to the UK, of course. And a massive thank you for joining me. It's great to have you on the podcast. I've said this about 2 or 3 people over the years, but I genuinely think you must be one of the busiest men in sailing. So thank you so much for giving us your time. We're here, of course, on the south coast of England. We're here for SailGP, round 4 in Cowes on the Isle of Wight. So let's kick off with some chat about SailGP. I mean, 3 events in, Russell. What's your overall feel on how it's been shaping up?
Well, we're obviously, working hard at this. I've felt for many years that there's been this aspect of as a professional entity in the sport where you've had this annual, repeatable championship, nation versus nation, in a format that really can broaden the appeal of the sport. I'm obviously passionate about the sport. This has been my life, and in many ways I think if we can create something that the kids of today and the kids of tomorrow are going to aspire to be part of, and they themselves can create their own dreams around, it's, in other words, it becomes aspirational for young people to then go on and become engaged with it. I think we'll really have something. And to be honest with you, that's been missing from the sport. It's been a lot of the process of getting through to these the so-called top echelons of the sport is word of mouth. It's been sort of a lot of who knows who, and there hasn't been an opportunity to go out and race for your country professionally according to a predefined pathway. So that's really what we're set out to do, and it's no different to what you see in a lot of other sports. I mean, a young kid aspiring to be a football player, they'd have their favourite teams, they'd have their favourite sports stars, they'd be able to follow them regularly and in various championship matches and so forth. They'd be able to ride through the ups and downs with those players, and so that you create the dream. And to me, that's kind of been missing. It's sort of like you get these kids that become really passionate about our sport, they do the Olympic Games, and then what? It all kind of falls flat, and some of them go on to, the lucky ones go on to do things. I look at my career, a lot of it in reality was chance. If I'd have been living in a different country, would I have achieved the same? Absolutely not. And that's where it's kind of been wrong. So yeah, I'm super passionate about this whole opportunity.
It's great to see you so energised. I mean, it's a massive undertaking, Russell. Let's break it down a little bit. What about the teams? I know you were involved in shaping some of them. How have they stepped up to the racing? How pleased have you been with that?
Real pleased. I mean, this has got to be a sustainable business in all forms for it to work. And so, we tried to select a lot of sailors that were right on the cusp of breaking through, and who a lot of us believe will break through. You look at a guy like Dylan Fletcher. I already think he's one of the future superstars in the sport. With Stu Bithell. So in other words, we're not necessarily only thinking about who is the superstar there now. It's who's going to be, and I think a lot of these guys actually already are. For many years, the top sailors have really been the top Olympic athletes, and they've never got the chance to then showcase their talents, beyond that. And so, to me, it was important to sort of try and address that problem. So, yes, we had a balance of experience and youth, and I think as it flows on, you're going to see more and more younger people that are jointly doing Olympic Games and racing in the professional echelons of the sport, which is exactly how it should be.
It's funny you mentioned Dylan Fletcher, who's the skipper of the British team, because someone said to me that you picked him because you saw a bit of the young Russell Coutts in him. Is that true?
No, he's driven though. He's the guy that, if I walk into the team bases, he's the guy sitting there analysing. I mean, they all do this, but to an extent. But he's the one that's just analysing for hours afterwards exactly the data and trying to really understand this at a high level. And so, a guy that's that driven, eventually, I think, provided they've got the talent he obviously has, at these high performance boats, eventually there's a good chance they'll be successful. Having said that, professional sports is tough, and it's tough at any level. You look at a guy like Phil Robertson, right? He's got his chance, and it's not going that great for him right now, and so in other words, this is to me that human interest story of how these people actually develop through can they capitalise on these opportunities? Can they make it to the top? We see that in all forms of life, whether it be, whatever career somebody's pursuing. I'm hoping that Phil makes it, by the way. There's the same with Billy Besson. He's having some challenges, but you can just see the determination in Billy's face. And I was actually talking to him this morning. It's great to see.
They're a special bunch, that's for sure. It's a brave step, though, isn't it? I mean, the boats, of course, we've seen before, the F-50s, heavily remodelled, but essentially the Cup boats from Bermuda. And so often with the America's Cup, Russell, the boats just sort of sit and die somewhere sad. I mean, why did you want to pursue this? What is driving you to take it on?
Yeah, there's been so much evolution with these boats in recent years that we really took the best of what, all that research and so forth that was done collectively for the America's Cup. We really took the best elements from that and started from there because we wanted a reliable platform. But, just now, Dylan and the British team broke 50 knots. Well, that was unheard of, even a year ago. But let's say in 2017, that was unheard of. And that's only the beginning. We're only doing tweaks to that right now. Next year there's a whole new wing sail coming on stream that's a modular wing that'll have a 18 metre wing for strong winds and a 29 metre wing for light winds. So obviously the 18 metre wing and stronger winds is going to be a lot faster. And then there's obviously new foils, being let's say the conceptual design work's being done now. It's super exciting because I liken it to, say, like if you look at a Formula One car, they've kept certain things, the same. Like they could cover the tyres, the car would be faster, right? But they've kept that look, but the car is evolving all of the time. They're constantly chasing greater performance. And I think that's like us. We've got to keep certain looks consistent, but there's a lot of performance things that we can chase. And it's honestly, yesterday the 50 knot barrier was broken. Wouldn't surprise me in a year and a half time if we see high 50s, maybe even 60 being approached.
What do you hope to achieve with it, Russell? I mean, if we looked 5-10 years on, what would SailGP look like? What's the long-term vision?
A group of teams that are profitable. And the way I say that is, the reason I say that is, you look at some of the iconic brands, team-wise, that we've all seen for years in our sport, and they come and go. It's really unfortunate. If I take some, a few examples, great teams like Stars and Stripes. When you had Dennis Conner at the top of his game, a fantastic brand gone. Australia too, again, in some ways, a record-breaking brand, gone. Doesn't exist anymore. And then you compare that to other sports, and you look at some of the great teams in other sports, and the brand lives on through different owners, through different star players, whatever. It doesn't just come and go. And in a way, that's what's wrong. You get these teams that are formed. In some ways, it affects families as well, because they go away, they do the project for a while, and then all of a sudden the whole thing shuts down, and it's now what? And you're looking for a new project, and the stop-start nature of the sport. So I think what solves that is if we can create a model, and we think this model that we've got is the most likely to succeed. You create a model whereby the teams become profitable, and therefore when an owner, for example, tires of being involved, that team is then traded. It doesn't just disappear. Or if some of the key sailors outgrow their life as a sailor in the team, new sailors are coming on board. There's a pathway for that. There's a youth academy sitting underneath the team that's taking these top Olympic sailors, and identifying the talent within their own country, and then giving them this, grooming them to then become part of the team. And so you'll end up having these team cultures being formed where people coming into it get drawn into it and drawn into the professionalism and so forth of the team, and develop a career pathway. You know, that's the vision, and that's what we want to try and achieve.
How long have you got to make it work?
Well, you know, we're fortunate. One of the key things, key reasons that projects like this may not be successful is a lack of funding. You know, when you're doing a startup, you obviously need to invest capital at the beginning, and obviously, you know, that's we've taken the vision, rightly so, that that's not going to last forever. So Larry's amazingly undertaken to underwrite this program for the first 5 years. And that gives us, frankly, a lot of scope to develop projects. You know, if we were looking at this as a 1 or 2 year operation, we would treat things completely differently. But we know that we can develop technology and so forth that's going to have longer term benefits. And we know we can invest in marketing, for example, and focused on, as an example, the countries represented, with the teams. We can focus that and know that we're building an audience that will then be useful for us in future years. I think it's a huge advantage to have Larry Ellison so passionate about doing this project.
So that's the concept. What about you, Russell? I mean, you're a very competitive man on the water. How much do you wish you were 25 right now?
Wow, well that'd be awesome. I'm very involved in youth sailing today, and I just look at these people, these kids, and the opportunities hopefully will be great for them in the future. I think we've got an exciting times in the sport right now. It's amazing. Not many sports get the chance to reinvent themselves. And there's a lot of sports out there right now that their memberships are declining, and there's no real solution, or none that probably the people involved or the people on the outside can really see. Here's the difference with what we've got right now, and here's the important thing. We've now got this opportunity to reset things that with a futuristic view that should have the possibility to last for a long time, and create a lot of interest in the young people that are involved in our sport. Well, what a great opportunity. And that's in a way, that's the magic of sailing. It's not just a physical sport. You've got this, these technical aspects that are connected with it as well, that can engage certain. It's obviously not a sport for everyone, but there's a lot of elements to it that could interest people at a young age. And I look at, for example, esports, and I'm intrigued by watching our young sailors. I've got a group of young sailors that all race on virtual regatta, and they all know each other's names, and they're all even internationally, and I just find that fascinating. That and they are fully engaged in this, and I think it's a great source of learning too. I'm not with everyone else that we sort of don't adopt that. I absolutely think we should be adopting that with open arms. We've got to look at this through the eyes of a young person, not what was great for us, in the past. For sure, we had I can look back a lot of great moments in my sailing career, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't be considering, hey, but how's that now been modified by what we're seeing today?
It's been interesting. We've just done a podcast with Nathan Outridge, the Japan skipper, and Chris Draper, CEO of the British team, and they're really aware of the chronology, I suppose, of what's happening in sailing right now. And so grateful to be in the sport at this exciting time. I mean, can you think of a time that's seen such radical change in our sport as now?
Well, probably not to this extent, The sport, in truth, the thing that excites me most, the sport's never really had a proper professional arm. It really hasn't. It hasn't been managed professionally, and for professional, as a professional entity. And right now, well, finally, what an opportunity.
It's incredible. I mean, I was out on the Solent yesterday with the Chinese team. 20 knots of wind, there's windsurfers on foils, kites on foils. I mean, the world's gone foil mad. Some say, I guess, that that's been driven by the America's Cup in a way, by proof that they're manageable, viable even. I mean, could you see this coming? I mean, when did you think, was there a moment where you thought, this is really going to take off?
Yeah, there was. I mean, obviously, I don't think anyone could have predicted that, it would have happened this quickly, let's say. And when, clearly one of the keys is, if you look at the marketing, all of a sudden we had a property that looked exciting and it was stimulating to even non-sailors. And all of a sudden they could start to follow it and understand it. They may not have known the intricacies of every aspect of it, but the number of people that have come up to me and said, wow, I never watched sailing in the past, and I never even realised it could be like that, but wow, this is actually generally exciting as a sports property, as a racing product. We used to, in the old days when we used to run events, we used to have all these other, whiz-bang features around it to try and attract interest. You'd have skydivers and you'd have all this, all these other side events, because you'd think, well, actually the sport property itself isn't really compelling enough, and we've got to put all these other aspects around it to try and make it fill the day in, so to speak. Now the racing product's good enough that you just put on the race. It's like, and that's in itself been a massive change.
Let's take a quick detour, Russell, if I may. I mean, obviously my sailing background was with the Olympics, and you tasted Olympic success in LA in '84, a gold medal in the fin class.
Yeah, well, you did a bit better than I did in the Olympics.
I mean, do you see the Olympic environment as a place that should be adapting to these changes we're seeing at the very top level of our sport?
Oh, absolutely. And example, recently I read a lot of comment on the selection of the Olympic classes and so forth. I think differently about that. I think we've got to look to, when you've got such a small number of kids doing some of these classes worldwide, and the cost of some of these boats that they're participating in, when you look at those two factors, I think you've got no choice but to change. And I think some of the initiatives that they're bringing in, like the kite foiling, fantastic. Why? It's a change to what I was doing, racing a fin years ago. But I think that has the potential to draw a whole lot more kids into this sport and really engage with it. I was standing there, we had the kite foiling nationals, hosted the kite foiling nationals at our local club, Manly, just north of Auckland, tiny little yacht club. And I was standing there with three of the girls out of our program, young girls that are sailing in our junior program afterwards. And I said, hey girls, what do you think of that? Oh, we want to do that. That's what we want to do. I want to get on one of those boards. How can we do that? And so in our junior program now, we're bringing that aspect into it. We're adopting it. Why? Because I think it has the potential to draw kids in, and they may be able to stick with it. You know what I mean? If they find something really passionate about. Of course, we haven't forgotten the traditional element. We've still got some great young kids that are really passionate about sailing laser, and some others are into 29ers, and some of them are into foiling boats like wasps and so forth, But the point is now, they've got these exciting choices, and I say let's give them the choices and let's adopt that as a sport, rather than saying, hey, we've done this for 50 years this way, and we don't necessarily want to change. I'm not saying we should be flippant about changing, but when there's a compelling argument to really change, then I think we should look at it. And when you go to a place like, I was in San Francisco for the SailGP event there, and you saw the number of kiteboarders out there on a Wednesday night, or if you look at in fact any night of the week there, but then you look at the number of board sailors or wind foilers, as they call them, and kite foilers that are sailing off the beaches around where we live now. It is creating, stimulating interest, and in many ways, it's a relatively cheap way to get into the sport. We all know that the foils themselves aren't cheap, but when you compare that to, some other choices that you have within the sport, it definitely, in my view anyway, is a very cost-effective option to get kids pretty competitive equipment, at a relatively cheap, price.
It's so exciting, I think. I mean, even I'm compelled by it, and the chance, I guess, to learn something that new and that fast.
Yeah, but you say even you, of course you are compelled by it. You love the sport, you know what I mean? And it's hard not to see it, especially a race. It's hard not to see a race in one of these things and say, wow, that's actually pretty cool, And I've heard all these people discard it and sort of say, oh yeah, it's lost all the tactical element and all this sort of thing. I actually think rubbish. Compare sailing downwind in a high performance boat to a low performance boat. A low performance boat, you generally go straight and you look for the puffs coming down behind you and you hedge towards those gusts and you sail the waves and so forth. A high performance boat, you're effectively tacking downwind. You're working the shifts, you're still looking for the sides of pressure, you have to judge ley lines into the bottom mark. Don't tell me that high performance sailing isn't tactical. It's in many ways, I could argue it's much more tactical sailing a high speed boat, even if you take a Melgus 24. A Melgus 24 to a heavy displacement boat of the same size, I can tell you, in my view, way more tactical sailing than the Melgus 24 downwind. So I think that commentary is mainly from people that actually don't sail high performance boats or have grown up sailing low performance boats and they've got a bias towards that. Do I love the fin? Yeah, I love the fin, but it's not the only solution out there. Let's be honest, people.
I've sat in the back of an F50. I can never fathom how they can make those tactical decisions at that speed. My brain doesn't work at 50 miles an hour.
And that's why we're not doing it, Shirley. And good, in a way. Yes, I think one of the special things about our sport is you can do it at an older age. I'm going to be jumping into a laser later this year on a Thursday night and battling it out against a whole lot of punters and kids and the whole lot. No doubt I'm going to love that.
Everyone will want to beat you.
Yeah, my legs might not love that, but the point is, of course I love that side of the sport. But I could, would I, if I was younger, would I be out there in a moth? Absolutely. I would have been out there pretty much every day, working on that. The design tools back in 2010 actually were pretty primitive. When I was competing, I'd love to win and used to compete fiercely. I won't tell you the answer that they gave, but it wasn't the people on the New Zealand boat.
We're going to touch a little bit on the America's Cups. The ones where foiling really took off. At the real elite end of the sport, it was San Francisco, wasn't it, back in 2013, where foiling really grabbed the world's attention. I'll never forget coming out into the bay the first day and watching those two giant boats lift out the water towards each other. It's a moment that will stick with me forever. You were in charge, of course, the defender of Oracle, and obviously Team New Zealand were in the cup match against you. What was the first inkling you had that their massive boat would fly? When did you know that this was on the horizon?
Oh, pretty early on, actually. Like a lot earlier than what people realised. You're right. It was amazing to see those boats in real life. Even when you look at them, and it's the same today. You look at them on video, and yes, it's pretty spectacular on video. You look at them in real life, it's still a wow moment. I could go out there today and look at the F50 sailing and be, wow, that is impressive. It's still like that. Yeah, so it was a game changer, and of course it started off with the boats foiling downwind, and then of course there was the development with the foil jibes, and then of course it evolved obviously to going upwind, and then the foil tacks, and of course we've seen a massive development. Equally as significant though was if you go back a few years to the giant wing sail that was put on the trimaran, because all of a sudden you could sail the boat more like a dinghy. The main sheet load in that situation went down from 25 tonne to 3 tonne. 3 tonne's still a lot of load, but the point is, all of a sudden you could play the sheet and adjust the sheet like you were more like you were sailing a 49er or a 29er or a boat where you're playing this actively, really working the trim of the boat. And so I think that's the whole move to the wing sail with the lower sheet loads has really enabled the progression for a lot of these aspects to really fast track the development, if you like, of the manoeuvres and so forth.
I remember that cup in Valencia. Every morning coming down to where your boat was and seeing the crew come off the boat. I mean, people sailed it all night. To me, it felt like such a massive risk, a massive development. Did it feel at the time like you were almost stepping on the moon?
Oh yeah, it was like brand new territory. Still is today. It still is. I mean, the guys. I was talking to the Americans last night. Rome Kirby and some of the guys, and they were saying when they get on these boats after they've had 2 or 3 weeks off, it's still sort of, oh wow, hang on a minute, I've got to get used to this again. It's impressive. You're definitely walking on new territory, that's for sure.
I mean, I felt at that time, I guess, that you're a man who's not scared to take risks.
Oh, calculated risks, I think, or logical, things that I wouldn't see it necessarily as a risk. You do your analysis, you get the information, and you make a decision. And sometimes the decision is going to be right, sometimes it's wrong. But and if you've acted on the right information, it's more likely to be right. So yeah, a lot of the products were obvious. When you look back, and it's just a matter of how. I think the surprising thing is how quickly it's evolved. The design tools back in 2010 actually were pretty primitive when you look at it today. A lot of that's been the advancements in computer technology and just the accessibility to analyse. It used to take days, sometimes even weeks to analyse, or if you're doing traditional models in the old times, measuring things in a wind tunnel or a towing tank, months, to analyse something. Now you can do it in a much more controlled way where you can pick your variables. For example, your winds, if you're checking things as compared to real life or the real, let's say, full scale results, you can control the environment in a computer obviously a lot more efficiently, and you can. That's why simulators are so powerful, because you can go through and you can try different things under a controlled environment and really zone in on why something's happening, which is fascinating. I think that's probably one of the biggest. Actually, I'll go back. That is the biggest change in the sport, is the way things have been analysed today in a technical sense. It's so much more efficient.
Let's talk a little bit more about San Francisco. I mean, it will be remembered not just within the sport of sailing, but within sport, not just for the amazing sight of those machines on the bay, but also obviously the greatest comeback that we'd ever seen. A lot's been documented about that, Russell, so we won't go into it too much. But I just wondered, honestly, when you look back, what do you think of those mad few weeks trying to turn that result around?
Well, first of all, I look back and we didn't do enough on the stories, the backstory. What a great story in a way. So yeah, the result was there, but not enough about the real story, what was going on behind the scenes, and well, that's half the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
But today, in today's world, you're seeing that these things are really resonating with people. When people can understand what people were feeling at the time and why it was hard. And
what were you feeling at the time?
Well, to be honest with you, I was thinking that a lot of the performance difference between the boats didn't make sense. It wasn't. It didn't. And as it turned out, at the end of the day, it didn't. The Oracle boat was a better boat. And so the fact that there was this performance difference in the way it was, you were seeing that early on. When you looked at all the configuration of things, and by the way, I could honestly say you could see the same thing in 2007 in reverse. I at least knew that they had a better package. But yeah, that was the surprising thing, and in a way, it would have been, it would have been one of the only occasions where the faster boat has lost if it hadn't have been turned around. Now I'm not saying it wasn't a great turnaround, because it was. In fact, but the fact that the team had got themselves that deep into trouble is probably one of the things that was the main intrigues with it.
I mean, it did a massive benefit for the sport. Everybody knew what was going on.
If you were Don King and you were promoting that, you'd imagine that he would have scripted that.
You could not have scripted that.
Okay, guys, we're going to go 8-1 down and then come back, and it's going to be a massive story. But no, that's not what happened.
I guess as the man in charge of making that happen, though, it's going to be. I mean, you talk about it very analytically, but it was massively stressful.
Look, in truth, Shirley. I believe, when I was competing, I'd love to win, and used to compete fiercely. So if I tried to say anything else, a lot of my competitors would say that's total BS, But the point is, I guess, you get to a stage in life where you realise that this is really a game, and it's not life and death. It's an interesting game, and it's a game that we, love to practice when we're competing and love to win and so forth. But you've got to keep it in perspective. And I think it's interesting. This image of for example, Larry Ellison being desperate to win and all that sort of thing, couldn't actually be more further from the truth. He's a passionate sailor. Loves to compete, loves to win, disappointed, maybe even upset when he loses, but actually loves the race and loves the competition and loves, that feeling of being in competition, and so, yeah, would it have been devastating to me if we'd lost at that point? I don't think so. I honestly don't. It wouldn't have been, life would move on and I'd be on to the next thing. And in actual fact, I've never really dwelled in the past. And I think that in a way, that's probably been what I would perceive as one of my advantages, As a sports person, the moment one thing was done, I'd always be on to the next thing and focused on the next thing.
4 years on in Bermuda, I mean, you created this incredible spectacle. The venue, I mean, it was designed.
The first steps into really event organisation. Obviously, I was working with the team in San Francisco and creating that new television product and everything. They were exciting times. Stan Honey and Ken Mills and all those guys building that whole Liveline package was amazing. And it was a massive step forward for the sport. So all of those things happening, and then sort of starting to take steps to put an event flavour on the sport and experiment with what was working and what's not. For example, question: how long should the broadcast be? How long should the event be? We moved a lot of things over those years. And I think discovered a lot of information about, running events. Still learning a lot today, and that's fun.
How pleased were you then with Bermuda as an event, and I guess with the broadcast package too?
Well, I thought it was a fabulous event. I guess the challenge is Bermuda's a small island, and we knew that, but its proximity to New York was one of the things that sort of countered that a little bit. We also had great super yacht support just because of its location and between the Caribbean and Europe and the Northeast. was a great location for the super yachts to come. And so the whole event vibe was pretty special, I think. You know, for anyone that was there, was it a great time? Yeah, it was an awesome time. And you know, I think anyone that was there actually either competing or just there as a punter, as a fan, it'd be hard to say, oh, it wasn't a very good event. I challenge anyone to find somebody that would say that.
I mean, you had an incredible vision, as we're seeing now, to carry the sport on, and it was an amazing spectacle in Bermuda. But I guess in the end, there was something that you're not very familiar with, Russell, and that was losing. You know, how hard was that loss in Bermuda to you?
Well, actually, not that significant at all. I was disappointed for the guys that put all that work in. But probably one of the biggest disappointments for me was that the racing wasn't very close. It wasn't as good as say, you know, you didn't have as many lead changes as what you had, for example, in the San Francisco racing, where for one part of the series anyway, one boat was faster upwind and one boat was faster downwind, so it sort of balanced things up. And so you saw that, you know, one boat with a technology advantage in Bermuda, and races were, they were 3 minutes apart, or maybe not 3 minutes, but certainly hundreds of metres apart, very quickly. And so you had this situation where we put all this effort into trying to create a race that was watchable and fans would engage with, and all of a sudden we were sitting there saying, oh, okay, getting beaten's one thing, but just the racing itself didn't actually look that good. And it's really what drove us to, hey, really we need a solution where we keep evolving the technology, but we make it such that the teams are getting access to equal technology. So we're not going to stand still with technology, but make it such that the technology doesn't compromise the quality of the racing product. Because in a way, you know, it's like when Formula One went through the era where it was a race to see who had the best tyres, and whoever had the best tyres won. Well, even though they're amazing cars and all the rest of it, pretty dull racing, and fans were turning off. And so, rightfully so, the Formula One organisers said, well, we can't live with that. We've got to change it and make it, you know, make it such that, you know, the tyres are equal. Of course, we all know that they're still, you know, probably not equal. But the point is, the idea is, we want a close race.
My last cup question.
Oh my!
I absolutely promise.
We've got to get away.
You know, it's been part of your life, hasn't it, since your early 20s?
But not.
Is it weird?
Not now, though.
Is it weird though now, not living that life?
No, not at all. Not at all. That's the thing about sailing. There's various facets that people get engaged with, and I'm super excited. I think what we're doing now is different, and a lot of big differences, and that's what that's what's driving me these days. It's creating something new, creating something that I think works, creating something that hopefully will be a platform for, you know, kids aspiring to really get into this at the top level. They can now be aiming for something and know that, you know, that's how I get there.
There isn't an easy answer here, Russell, but I guess something that I'm curious about is what it is about Russell Coutts, particularly out on the water, I guess, that's made you so successful competitively.
Well, there's been some ups and downs, that's the first thing, so don't believe all that stuff. But I don't know, I was, I think probably I had, you know, for my era, let's say, I had a good handle on the technology and you know, a good handle on some of the balance aspects of the boat, you know, some of the forces that were involved and what was influencing those. So I think I was able to, you know, when you look at, for example, when we were doing the match racing circuit and going around and jumping in a whole range of different boats, it enabled us as a team to get in and know what might be fast in certain boats just by looking at the design of them and figuring out, or looking at the balance of the boat and figuring out, well, really, this is how we should approach this from a logical standpoint. So that was probably one of the factors. It sounds cliche, but having a bunch of good guys around me that we got on well as friends, as well as as sailing, teammates. That was massive. Like, the journey was fun. In other words, it's not like I see a lot of these kids in Olympic Games, and one of the first questions I'll ask them is, "Hey, how's it going?" It's, "Oh well," and then they start talking about their results. Yeah, but how's it going? Because I think that's such a big part of winning. If you're generally not enjoying the journey, if that's of course we all know that training's hard, competition's hard, it doesn't always go your way. But if the journey's crap, then it's really hard, you know what I mean? It's like, wow, you've just made it tenfold more difficult trying to win and succeed.
That's funny you say that. I mean, I feel exactly the same. I loved a long day out training. I relished that.
But I always used to think the little things like, which, again, I'll rephrase that. I don't think they're that little, actually. For example, celebrating a victory with the team, really important moment. You've almost got to be there. You know what I mean? And some people will say, "Oh, you missed a few." Yeah, I did. But I guess realizing afterwards, hey, that was a mistake. But just being there in those moments, sharing those moments, and also going through the tough times as a group. You can still it's tough at the time, but that journey is actually, when you sit back and look at it, fun. Fun, and man, we used to have some fun.
Do you think you're ruthless?
Oh, in some ways, yeah. I used to win, and take some. I think my competitors definitely didn't think I was a pushover. That's for sure. That's, but that's again, because I guess I didn't used to treat it as life and death. To me, that of course, why not? And it was just a part of the game, if you like. And so yeah.
What about for you, Russell? Why do you think you've been so driven? All these campaigns. I mean, it's tough. It's time consuming. What's been driving you to keep coming back time and again?
Well, I love the sport. It's. If I look at where years ago where I started, I was actually, as a 15-year-old kid, I was coaching other junior sailors. And I loved that aspect of it, and I just loved trying to get people to love the sport as much as I did. Basically why I was doing it. And to me, that's half the reason. Do I need to be doing what I'm doing these days for financial reasons? Absolutely not. It would be obvious to at least some people. I'm doing it because I want to see the sport succeed. And that's really probably what's driven me most in the sport over the years.
I mean, those America's Cup campaigns, they're all consuming. Particularly,
but so is an Olympic campaign. In some way, Olympic campaign, I'll argue, America's Cup campaign is probably difficult because you've got all those people around you, and some of the SailGP guys coming in now, that are now managing their teams are finding that. This is a new dimension. All of a sudden, they're not having to deal with 2 or 3 people. It's a whole squad of people, and you've got all of the challenges around that. So that's the challenge with that. But in the Olympic programs, even though you might have some support from your national authority and so forth, and you might have your coach, it can be more lonely, if you like, and that's again why I think, hey, you've got to find a way to enjoy that journey.
Do you think all that focus, cost you in a way, personally, when you look back?
Oh yeah, did I miss out on doing some things that I've liked to do? Yeah, but actually not much, you know. I mean, wow. Would I do much differently? Probably not. And I can honestly say that, probably not. Have I said some dumb things over the years? Absolutely. Have I done some things that you wouldn't do again? Absolutely. But overall, would I change much? No. No. Of course, you know, I absolutely, you know, have had a great, you know, time and, you know, doing what I've been doing.
What about at home, Russell? I mean, you won the Cup for New Zealand, a huge deal, obviously. Then you beat your own country sailing for the Swiss, for Alinghi, and then beat Alinghi with the Americans, with Oracle. I mean,
we're back on America's game. No,
this is my last one, but it's been a pretty brutal decade or so of sailing. I know you don't want to talk about it, but I'm just curious, I guess, on
no, what I would say
how
about
you feel at home.
What I would say about that is, what an experience for a sports person, you know, because not many sailors yet, and hopefully we can create something that does address this, but not really many sailors yet have felt that what it feels like for a football player to go into the opposing team's stadium and get ribbed by the crowd and so forth, you know. As a sports person, you can take that as a challenge. You know, but to experience that at that moment, I still think about those moments sometimes. Not from the sports point of view, from what it felt like to be there, you know, and great memories. You know, yes, there was a lot of challenges, and there were a bunch of parochial New Zealanders that were pretty extreme actually, and I think as a country, that changed things as well. You know, people actually reflected on that and thought, well, you know, hey, at the end of the day, it was a sport. We were really acting, you know, as we'd like to in that situation. But for me as a sports person, wow, what a brilliant experience. You know, it was great.
What did that feel like?
Awesome. And somebody once told me that when we were towing out through the vast raft of spectator boats and so forth, and I remember there was a Maori haka on the point, and the hundreds of thousands of people, you know, there, and you're driving out through that, and parts of it, you know, you could just see the I guess the intensity of it on people's faces. You know, it was as if, you know, there was almost this war mentality, you know. And this guy that I know was with a group of Optimist kids in New Zealand, and actually from one of the provinces in New Zealand, and he said to them, who would you rather be right now, right? Because there was the Team New Zealand boat towing out, and there was the Alinghi boat towing out. And I won't tell you the answer that they gave, but it wasn't the people on the New Zealand boat, amazingly. You know, and what I would say about that is, sports creates emotions in people. You know, it's what we've got to do with SailGP. We've got to bring out those emotions and bring out the backstories behind the athletes and so forth, and get people to actually care about the people and form a view about the people. They might not like a certain person, they might like one of the other ones, but get them to really connect emotionally with the sport.
What's it like in New Zealand now? I mean, I always laugh when I read the Kiwi press. I mean, it's absolutely brutal. I mean, they've really long memories.
Yeah, they're not exactly balanced either, I would say, in general, you know.
But I mean, you live there. What's it like?
But you see that in the rugby reporting and everything, you know. I mean, it's just like, it's not just isolated to sailing, and you know, there is only one side. You know? But yeah, I think the country's changed a fair bit over the last, you know, 15, 20 years actually. Yeah, and you know, it's rare for me to have any, very rare, I'd say, to have any pushback these days, you know. At the time, of course, if you walk down the street in a Alinghi t-shirt, you'd get some ribbing for sure, you know. But nowadays, no. It's. I think people are, frankly, the country's grown up a fair bit.
Okay, let's take a glimpse into the future, Russell. I mean, where do you think the sport is going? And my son sails. He's really into it. He loves all the tech, the wings, the foils. He's out there in his dinghy, quite possibly, imagining he's the next Pete Burling, like kids do. I mean, what's he going to be competing in 10 years from now? What's that going to look like?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd say whatever drives him, I'd give him lots of choice. Expose him to a lot of things and see where that takes him. Let him find his passion, And I've got my young 13-year-old's very passionate about it too. He's fully into all the foiling stuff and, races as wasp and into the moths already and, just loves that aspect of the sport. Yeah, exciting times for kids, isn't it? It really is. And I think these kids of today, they actually learn in a different way to what we learned. They look at these videos online, like they can look at, my young boy can look at videos of Nathan Outridge sailing a moth and then take that on the water, go out and practice and figure it out. And then he'll figure out, well, actually, I don't like what Nathan's doing there. And this is a 13-year-old kid. I'm actually going to modify that a bit, which is fantastic, I think the way they learn now is brilliant, and it's very visual, and they're able to access this information online, and then create. You can imagine these kids going to sleep at night thinking about these things. How do I do the foil tack? How do I do the How do I do that manoeuvre that I saw this really good sailor do online? And I think the other thing that's really exciting about the sport is this push into gender diversity that's really been, I must say, spearheaded by World Sailing. Brilliant. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And we're now just starting to see the impact of that in our junior sailing programs. Long way to go, but it's moving in the right direction.
I mean, Russell, you've been such a driver for momentum and change. How does that feel, and do you see yourself in that role?
I wouldn't say change for the sake of changing. I just think good ideas need to be pursued, and when you see good ideas, you obviously got to adopt that. There's a history in the world of major companies disappearing because they don't change with the times. Everyone of my age will relate to this. Remember when we were all on Blackberries? Now, I bet you the people in that company never thought that they would be, going away that quickly. So of course they still kind of exist today. But let's be honest, it's changed. The world's changed, and I think that's the attitude that we've got to take today. It is a different world. And we've got to look for these opportunities and really, make the most of them.
I mean, Russell, you could stay at home and play golf every day, but you choose to drive the momentum of the sport. Why?
Well, first of all, I couldn't play golf every day. My back would give out. and I'd get bored with it. No, I like to be active. I like to be doing stuff, and these days I'll only chase projects that I'm passionate about. It's that simple.
And lastly, looking back, I mean, you've achieved such a lot within the sport. What do you think you would have done differently? Anything?
Not really, no. I think, first of all, I was very fortunate to be in the right time in the right place, for my particular career. I mean, in some ways I look back, seriously, who would have thought, you know what I mean? And I'm not just saying this through false, or false modesty, I was very fortunate to be right at the right time, all of a sudden with the right people around me to then go on and have these opportunities. So that was really the the big, I guess, turning point or tipping point, for me. I mean, there was a time where I came out of Olympics and was going through university and got married too young, and things weren't going ideally, let's say, and it definitely, the various points could have taken a wrong corner, but I just seemed to have the right opportunities come along at the right time, and whammo, all of a sudden, you're way on this pathway. So, yeah, good times.
Well, Russell, it's been a pleasure. I hope it hasn't been too painful. I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you so much for your time.
No, thanks.
What do you think of Russell's chat? It would be great to hear from you. Leave a note on iTunes, at Shirley Sail on Instagram and Twitter, or send an email, podcast@shirleyrobertson.com. Well, that's about it for this month. Next month, we've a real treat in store. I've managed to track down one of the foremost skippers in solo offshore sailing. And I say track down because Sam Davies is not a woman that keeps still. I've known Sam forever. We actually raced together way back before she realised that my kind of racing was all a little sedate for a prestigious offshore talent. She was always destined to do something pretty special in the offshore world. And that she has certainly achieved. She's currently well into the preparation for her third Vendée Globe, and if you've seen shots of her new foiling in Mokka 60, you'll see she is, as ever, a very real contender in a fleet comprised of the world's best offshore talent. And as you'll hear, it's a prospect she's relishing. Thanks again for listening. It's really great to have your company, and as ever, a massive thanks to the gorgeous Tim at Vertigo Films for editing, mixing, and just lovingly producing the podcast. You're brilliant. Until then, thank you so much for listening. Have fun on the water, and sail safe, everyone.
This is Castle 1, race officer speaking.
Pressure coming here, pressure coming.
We're 1.5 below.
Stand by, 2 dives here, boys.
We're looking at 10.5 and 42. This is Castle 1 standing by. Out.